We the aforementioned shittiness of Spectrum continues. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. Take two. Yeah, we're back. Again, Spectrum fucking sucks. I mean, there's just nothing else to say about it. Again, I'm pretty much convinced that they just like at nighttime they just assume no one uses the internet and they just like randomly shut off their DNS servers and all this other stuff. It's annoying. It's terrible. I feel bad because it's like, hey, sometimes I want to stream in the middle of the night, and it's like really difficult, and it's just so terrible, and there's just nothing I can do about it. Yeah. I don't think, I even just looked this up, and it's like, yes, Spectrum does perform maintenance that can cause temporary service interruptions in the middle of the night to minimize disruption, but it is not a scheduled universal shutdown. These nightly maintenance windows are intended to allow for technical adjustments, repairs, and system upgrades and affect the least number of customers. So basically, they're just like, yeah, we just deal with it. And every night there is network maintenance and outages, and it just sucks. So I don't think a VPN would actually, I don't actually think a VPN would help, because it would just be, it's my, it's not necessarily my node. It's right, exactly, Smendon. It's not a night where you are. Yeah, Mecca, I definitely noticed it around midnight, like 2 a.m. It's pretty common. Hey, Haldred, stopping in to say hi again. I work nights. Hey, thank you. Hey, $50. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for that very generous super chat. I don't usually get to join a live stream. Your live streams a deep dive to set me on my very own path of game design. Have fun at the con. Thank you, Haldred. Awesome. Haldred, what are you designing? What are you thinking about? What games have inspired you? I'd love to hear about it. That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate your support of the PAX Travel Fund. Why is that not working? And now, like, my audio isn't capturing. What's going on? A mess. Okay, there we go. Checking. All right, there we go. It's a Blades Fate Traveler mashup currently. Well, Haldred, that sounds amazing. Have you read Scum and Villainy, Haldred? Just to let you know, there's like definitely some sci-fi traveler-esque. I knew Beowulf would be interested. Just saying. I mean, Scum and Villainy is basically Blades in space, but it doesn't have the elements necessarily of Fate or Traveler. It's literally just Blades in space. But yeah, we're back. We had 100 people, and now we're down to 20. People are like, fuck it, who cares? But unfortunately, yeah, Spectrum sucks. And so unfortunately, we have to go back. We have to go all the way back. Any more thoughts on what extra stuff you can do to draw in more people? I don't know, Smendon. It's tough. It's tough. I don't want to sell my soul out. Because like I said, I need this much monthly revenue in order to pay my bills and break even. And I'm like here. I will say, in all honesty, July though was great. So Dagger Month was very good for Derek's bottom line. Now, of course, I can't actually, it's very difficult to make plans about tip income, because it's very random. It depends on the type of, streams that we do. It depends on what the patrons vote for. If if I'm doing a 2-part deep dive into Sentinels of the Multiverse, chances are pretty good that I'm gonna do very modestly, which is fine, and that's the way I've always run the channel, which I love. It's just how do I figure out a way to make things economically feasible for me without like selling out the soul of the channel and still doing the things that are really cool and really interesting. So I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. To be honest with you, I haven't. I've just been so busy. I've been running from con to con the whole summer, and after the nightmare that was the first couple of months of the year with my life and my dad and my job and the dogs and everything else, it was just like, okay, I'm not going to worry about this. I know I have some money in the bank from saving up for money and getting my severance, so it's fine that I'm not making enough money to cover my expenses. I'll figure it out later. Very irresponsible of me. I don't recommend you do it. But yeah. Outside of that, I don't really have okay, that's cool. Yeah, Haldred, that's definitely something that Traveler does very well, which is have a long form campaign. People have run Traveler campaigns for like decades. Traveler is cool. Traveler is probably the game that is the most simulationist, that is the most interesting to me. And a big part of the reason for this is because a lot of simulationist games I've discovered use either extremely complicated like hit targeting rules or extremely complicated like D100 systems, and I just love that Traveler is just like a simple 2d6 system. I actually do really like that it's very simple. Yeah, no hot tub streams, Beowulf. But I will say that when I get back from PAX, I get back from PAX and then I go to Vegas. But then I'm home for like 2+ months. So I'm really going to try to hit the gym up. What is the full name of that game? Which game? Yes, and Dragons. So yeah, Traveler's great. I think it's really neat. A lot of different things you can do about it. I hate cyberpunk. I've talked at length about why I don't like cyber. I don't like the genre. I don't like the thing. I don't know. As for the game, I'm I don't know. Don't know. Oh, Traveler. Traveler. That is the name of the game. Anyways, so yeah, one of the ideas that I wanted to sort of use for Dagger Reaches, right, is to sort of again lean into this. I talked about this in one of my streams, but like I think that I like the idea of like tonal resonance. So like I want hope and fear to be more than just a thing that we talk about in the game. And so one of the ideas that I have for like Dagger Reaches is I like the idea of hope and fear at like a macro level, and that the players are going to be working towards building and accumulating hope that they can spend on good things to have happen, and then that fear, the sort of like mega fear, mega hope, is something that the GMs can use in order to sort of make problems and negative consequences kind of happen, because this is sort of like we're going really deep into like the game design tank here, which is it is currently 2:30 a.m. My flight boards at 5:30 a.m. Or sorry, my flight leaves at 5:30 a.m. So it'll start boarding at 5 a.m. So I probably want to be there at 4:30 a.m., which means I probably need to leave here at about 3:30 a.m. to make sure I get there. It's about 45, 50 minutes to the airport from my house, give or take. So anyways, and if I was just like, it was just me, like I wouldn't even care. I'd get there with like 10 minutes to spare, but like, you know, it's kind of Steven's thing and I don't want to fuck up the thing and miss a flight. And then like the whole fucking thing is messed up. No, I like to walk on the flight pretty much, but, so this is just sort of like a more of a game design thing. So part of the problem that we have currently is that in northern reaches is that we have like these events, okay, and they're usually represented by clocks, okay. So let's say that we have this 8 clock, okay, and let's just say it's called like you know, I don't know, the orcs take over, okay, let's just call it that. So what drives this clock? Well, the answer might surprise you. Well, it won't surprise you, but the answer is the GMs. Now, I have always gotten into a lot of debates and fights with people in the Northern Reaches community, including my co-designers, Bob and Aaron, because I have a very different belief in that most people feel like the GMs are the goats, and they are, in the sense that they are the ones. Without the GMs, we don't have a game. Fair enough. But I don't think that's fair, because without players, you wouldn't have a game either. And ultimately, the game is about the player. And the reason why I say that the GMs drive this is because what the GMs will do is they will create a session. The PCs will go into that session. The PCs will do things in that session. And then the GM will sort of report to the to the council or to the overlords what impact that session should have to this clock. Like, should 2 segments get filled, or maybe you know, a segment gets deleted because of the actions of the PCs. But what it means is that there's sort of an interface difference between what the PCs do and what they actually affect. The other problem is that those are quotation marks. I don't technically they're real GMs. They're not just fake GMs. The problem with this is that, number one, the players, it's the GMs who are really sort of driving it. But the other problem is the GM. There's a bias here, because as a player, you can only affect the clocks and the events for those sessions that a GM is willing to run. Right? So if a GM doesn't run, you know, an orc adventure, then as a PC, you may be limited in your ability to influence this clock or this adjustment. So one of the ideas that I kind of want to play around with is the idea of it. Now it's abstracting. It absolutely is abstracting. But I kind of like the idea that as a player, you play in a game session, and at the end of that session, as a PC, you are awarded a form of meta currency by the GM. Now, the GM will still have this meta currency that you can control. Or the GM will still have say over what this meta currency is. But then each player, and it's not a group thing, okay? Each PC gets this meta currency. Depending on what happened in that session, the GM would make those decisions. And, you know, some of that might be something that's very well stated beforehand. But then the players themselves get this meta currency. Then, separately from the session, is the player will spend that meta currency on the events and clocks and progress that they want to advance or that they want to sort of, push ahead. Now, originally with Dragontide, because it's more old school based, we basically came up with 4 generic resources, and they were called supply, wealth, knowledge, and influence. I can't type influence. And depending on the type of adventure that you went on, you might gain more or less of these resources on an adventure. And the idea of this was to sort of abstractify it so that it would work across GMs. And what I mean by that is, rather than getting caught up into the minute, like if your group in Dragotide, if your group raided an enemy stronghold and you seized their, you privateered and you seized an enemy ship, rather than getting caught up into the minutia of how many pounds of salted pork that you acquired, the GM could just say, hey, you know what, you guys got +10 supply, +2 wealth. Maybe it wasn't particularly wealthy, but they had a lot of supplies. No knowledge because you didn't really gain anything, but you also gained some influence because people are really happy that you're attacking this thing. And so now every PC gets 10 supply, 2 wealth, and 2 influence. Now your PC has that extra meta currency, which is somewhat diegetic, right? It's not just literally made up in bullshit, but it is sort of genericizing the concept. It's like handfuls of gold in Daggerheart, right? And rather than getting caught up on like, hey, you just killed 10 enemy pirates, and you're like, cool, we loot them. And rather than being like, okay, well, they had 10 suits of leather armor and 10 scimitars and 4 water, rather than tracking all that, you just say, hey, sure, you loot them, you gain 4 supply, or you gain 3 supply or whatever. And then different events and different clocks would require different amounts of resources in order to interact with them. Some resources might be more useful for some type of events and some type of clocks than others. And again, we're abstractifying it. You might go raid a pirate den and, acquire all of their gear, and we call that supply. And then back at town, there might be a project, a community project to expand the harbor, which might allow the next class of ships to be built. Right now, you can only build tier 0 and tier 1 ships, but people really want to build tier 2 ships. Well, to do that, we need to expand the harbor project to complete, and the expand the harbor might require supply. And you could use the supply from your pirate expedition and on this. Now you're like, wait, I don't understand. Like, okay, like what is the supply for expand the harbor? It's like, stone and brick and, to build out a new seawall, to build out a new breakwater, piers, logs, timber to build new wharfs and new docks. And you're like, wait, I don't understand. How is the weapons and armor that I, secured from the pirate den being translated into that? We're not worrying about it. We're abstractifying it. And this way we can allow the GMs to sort of run a game and then, just award this one currency that the player can dictate how that depicts it, instead of the GM deciding I'm running a game that's going to give you building supplies that you can use to expand the harbor. Because now the GM is really the one who's controlling whether or not the harbor gets built or not. Does that make sense? So this system was, I don't know fully where we are with this in Dragontide because we never really fully finished it, but it is something that I really want to figure out for Dagger Reaches before I would go live with it. I might even steal or use some variant of this. Now, that's correct, Haldred. That's exactly right. So the way that this would work is that. So Haldred said, are there thresholds for how much supply one clock tick? Yeah. So because we're talking about much larger scale of things here, so expand the harbor might require 50 bundles to complete. And a bundle for this project, Expand the Harbor, might be 3 supply, 1 wealth, and 1 knowledge. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe it's 5 supply or whatever. And so every time you have 5 supply, 1 wealth, and 1 knowledge, you can make a contribution of 1 bundle to this project. And then it would be at, 1 of 50. And, obviously for one person to complete this would probably be very difficult. But if everybody's over there and they're all contributing, chunk, 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 that is now I'm getting into like Dragon Tide elements here, because one of the things that we were going to do with the town actions is that the town was going to have things like buildings that it started off with, that players could use their downtime actions for in order to convert things into other resources. So, for example, there might be a library, right, that lets you convert, supply into, knowledge, say, I don't know, or maybe wealth into knowledge or something like that. And the idea is that there's sort of a hierarchy, right? That supply is sort of the most common resource, wealth is sort of uncommon, and then like knowledge and influence are sort of more rare, right? Anyways, so there was an idea that you could then use these town actions to sort of convert resources. So that way people might go out on an adventure, get a bunch of supply, and then they could go back to town and they could use these town actions. And then of course, people might have a project, which is to upgrade the library so right now, maybe originally it was, you could convert 3 supply into 1 knowledge. But maybe there's a project to upgrade the library to the Grand Library. And now there's a new option that lets you or whatever. Now it's 2 supply, let's just say, make it into 1 knowledge. Right? And so now the library is better. And now you can more efficiently convert 1 resource into another resource. And the group might decide, to do this. You see a 4x opportunity, right? We start doing arbitrage on resources. Yeah, sure, why not? How does completing a clock affect the world? Well, yes, in Dragons. I mean, that depends on what we've decided. So there's obviously a narrative impact. We should always respect the fiction. But as I said before, expanding the harbor, we would have to identify and detail what its mechanical effects are. So in the case of expanding the harbor, like I said, we might now allow tier 2 ships to be built and dock at the shipyard. We might say that all merchant trade gets +1 wealth. And we might say that the storm at port event, maybe is modified or is lessened, because normally maybe there was an event that can happen where the ships get damaged because a bad storm that comes in. Well, now you have a better harbor, and whatever. What is Spectrum unit? What is Spectrum? That's my internet provider, and they suck. They went out. That's why I had to cancel my stream and start a new one. Why we had 100 people and now we have 40. And so now one of the things that makes a community game interesting is there might be several projects. There might be 3 projects, 4 projects, 5 projects, 6 projects, and you have to decide. Where should as a player I have all this resources now. Community, this is where we're typing on our keyboard, talking to each other in Discord, maybe hopping into a voice chat. Where you need to convince me of where I should be putting my resources. Should I be putting my resources into expanding the harbor, or should I be putting my resources into upgrading the library, or should we be building our own a defensive navy? Or should we be doing research into a weather control ritual? Or should we be doing, right? And there's all these different things that are going to be sort of competing for your interest, but it's going to be driven by the players. Now, the players still need to go out and adventure in order to earn these resources. That's the best way. Now, to be clear, there is a way to earn resources without adventuring. That's where the solo players come in, because I understand that there's going to be players who can't do it solo. But adventuring, being dangerous and the most, look, it's a TTRPG. I want to encourage people to play the TTRPG. Adventuring is going to be the best place where you can earn that. But it also means that you're putting yourself sort of at the whims, right, of the vagaries of fate. The GM might fuck you. You might die. Bad things might happen to you that are outside of your control. That's the risk of going on an adventure. But there should be good rewards, right? The idea is that, yeah, you could stay at home and, a character might be able to stay in town and just do a bunch of research and spend time at the library. And, at the end of the week, they've generated 10 knowledge units. And they're like, cool, that's really cool. That's awesome. And they did that, by the way, at home on their phone throughout the course of the day, in the middle of the night while sitting on the toilet, and they did it at their own time. And it took them, maybe 30 minutes or 45 minutes of engaging with a little bit of a skill check and mini game in a bot in the Discord channel. On the other hand, another player may have gotten together with a group of players and they went and found some ancient site of pre-cataclysmic knowledge where the ancient runes were written down that sort of detail the great unmaking that led to the great cataclysm, which destroyed the continent and led to the creation of the archipelago, and mysteries about the dragon tide. And they gained 20 knowledge from that session, right? Because they fought through the ancient guardians of that place, and they journeyed into the festering swamp on some godforsaken island somewhere deep in the archipelago. They braved krakens and sea monsters and underwater volcanoes to get there, and they had an awesome adventure. And they could have died, and their stuff could have been destroyed, and their ship could have crashed, and they could have been marooned, and all number of things could have happened to them, but they didn't, and they overcame, and they TTRPG'd, and plus 20 knowledge. And they they come back. Now, again, what does ancient ruins of the pre-cataclysmic nature have to do with building a harbor? Nothing. But it's a way that I can put the proactivity and put the power back into the players' hands, right? If that makes sense. I know. Well, Haldred, you may have missed it earlier, but I was complaining about how AT&T fiber is not available in my area. Although in theory, they've put up signs lately that say AT&T fiber coming soon, and they put it in like a neighborhood next to me. So I'm hoping that means maybe someday, maybe 2026, we get it. I don't know. I have not, Finlay. That's correct. On Neverwinter Nights, my friends and I called this refusal of the call to adventure bench sitting. Yeah, that's pretty good. Where you just sit in the tavern and role play drinking your ale or whatever. Yeah, and you know what? For some people, that's how they want to engage with the game. And while I don't want to completely dismiss that player, I do want to reward people who go out and adventure. Now, yes, and dragons, you're well-meaning in intention. You have just described what is the nuclear bomb and has destroyed countless Patreon accounts over the last 4 years. So, unfortunately. So, yeah. Every time we have implemented something like that, it has led to disaster. Including most recently. Oops. Because it's natural to assume that there's going to be conflict and that there's going to be two sides, and there's going to be one side who wants something to happen and another side who doesn't want something to happen. And so naturally we set them at odds with each other, right? And then we get this originally started with the original Jagged Pine War. That is correct. And that led to a lot of vitriol and a lot of problems. And most recently it started with an event clock, appropriately enough, called Political Machinations. And it was like two nobles who were like competing over whatever, and one side, two nobles enter, one noble leaves, and there was a lot of complaint about it. And the truth of the matter is, it's just PvP is not, it's not a great It's not a great solution. Unfortunately, it's just not. It's there's a place for that kind of. I don't even know that there's a game that really does that. Like, because even like World of Warcraft, like, the Horde was like its own game. You weren't like trying to coexist with them. They would just sometimes kill you in a PvP zone. You couldn't even talk to them, right? And also there was like thousands of players. When you're talking about a game that only has like 50, 60, 70 players, creating in groups and out groups it just leads to a lot of problems. And that is exactly right. Spending time achieving a goal just to have it erased because someone else outside of my control does something against it feels really shitty. And that's exactly what happened. So the original Jagged Pine pack that Alia was talking about was in season 1, you had the city of Northport, and Northport was the hometown, and Northport had a level, and that level determined what kind of items were available, what you could craft, right? Like what you could buy out of the book. In other words, if the level of Northport was low, it meant that you couldn't buy better items. It also meant that if your character died, because there was permanent character death, if you made a new character, what level did they start at? So if Northport's level was 6, you could buy gear and magical items up to level 6. Like you could buy striking runes and you could buy, all that other stuff. If Northport's level was 10, you could buy +2 potency runes and greater striking runes or whatever. If Northport's level was 3, you couldn't. Next to Northport was a zone called the Jagged Pine Forest. And eventually there was we wanted to give people sort of an option. So there was a clock. And it was a tug of war clock, right? Which if it filled up completely, then the Jagged Pine Forest got basically cut down, and Northport used the resources and the lumber to level up. If the clock emptied, in other words, if it was completely empty, then the Fey forces of the Jagged Pine sort of prevailed, and everybody would get free archetype druid added to their character. So everybody would become a druid. Like the powers of the spirits of the forest would bless the characters in the game. For months, the clock would tick, and then it would untick. And then someone would make it tick, and then it would untick. And then someone would make it tick twice, and then someone would make it untick twice. And for months, people just spent their time just undoing what other people did. And it led them to hate those people. Like, it started off like, oh, we're all doing this in character and all this other. But no, it led to, like, because it felt like you are going out of your way to fuck me over. And they kind of were. And it was not good. It was just not good. And it led to a lot of bad, and for me, from a practical standpoint, I lost players. I lost patrons. Not everybody who left the game left the Patreon, but it did cost me money. So yeah, it got really petty. Correct. It got really petty. Whether your character and your character's conflicts are your conflicts, or if you're an author of a story your character is in and your character's conflicts are a story about your character. Yes, this is actually a fundamental perspective or stance distinction I see between PBTA players and D20 players. Correct. Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, it's not really possible to manage these, because even when we do stuff that's opt-in, people still get upset because we're humans. We're not logical beings. We're emotional beings, and we respond to things emotionally. So you guys are great. I love it. You guys are in real time going through what we did for years. So that was season 1. So season 1, we had what we call a tug of war clock, right? Which is also a zero-sum clock, right? If I'm winning, you're losing. It's a very Ameritrash way of thinking. So we said, oh, you know what we'll do? We'll learn from Euro games. We'll learn from Catan, right? We'll do racing clocks, right? That way it's not If you win, I lose. Great. That'll solve the issue. It did not solve the issue. Because here's your clock. Here's the enemy's clock. And you're filling yours in, 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 and you're so close to filling it in. But a GM won't run a game for you. It's not your fault, but no GMs are available, and they're getting close to finishing theirs, and you really want to run yours, and then you get a GM to run yours. They run it, you complete the thing, and they say, I'm going to award 1 tick, right? Because that's their option. They can award 1 tick or 2 ticks or whatever. Then another GM runs a game for this clock. Now, all the GMs in our game are also players. And that GM is a player who wants this clock to finish. They run this event for their friends. They give it 2 ticks. And they make a very compelling case. It's not like they're just making it up. And now these people are pissed off. Very pissed off. So, oops. So now it's those GMs aren't being biased. That's not fair. They're all in North America, and they can all run games for each other whenever they want. It's one big gaming circle jerk where one GM just runs the game for one group of players, and that group of players is also a GM who runs the game for the other thing. Blah 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 blah. I mean, it doesn't matter. We could allow 1 tick, and it still would cause still cause endless debate. I promise you. You know how I know that? Because we just did that. This was season 2, by the way, what I'm showing you right here. Then season 3, I just had to issue a gigantic apology letter, and I had to unwind a bunch of decisions that were made. And it's because we put in a political clock where you could only tick it once. But it was a race, and people got upset. And by the way, in this instance, in season 3, the racing clocks, it was a tie. So it wasn't even like they lost. It was a tie. And people were still upset. So, it's a real problem. And to be clear, one of the problem that we have, I'm not saying it's a problem, it's just an inevitable thing. Remember, GMs are not paid to do this. They're volunteers. Is that GMs are almost all they're all PCs. That we have had in the history of like Northern Reaches, like 1 or 2 people who are like, yes, I only want a GM and I never want to play ever. So every GM is typically also a PC. Now, again, I'm just walking you through the challenges of this. Where were we here? Okay. So originally we had Northport, right? And then we had different zones. So there's zone over here, zone over here, zone over here, zone over here. And if you signed up to GM in a zone, you could not play in that zone to try to keep bias to a minimum. This was season 1. In season 2 and season 3, we got rid of that. Why? Well, because GMs complained. Because a GM signed up for this zone. They can't play in it, but now some really important event is occurring, and it's occurring in this zone. And a GM is running a game in that zone, and they have 5 open slots. And they've filled all 4 of them, but there's 1 open. Come on, we have 1 open. Can't you come play in this really important event that's going to decide the future of the game? No, I can't because I'm a GM in this zone. This sucks, Derek. I wouldn't have signed up to GM in this zone if I knew it was going to be cool. Next season, I don't think I'm going to GM because I don't like being locked out. Well, as soon as I hear something is causing negative correlation with people wanting to GM, I have to remove it. Because these games live and die on the number of GMs who are willing to run games. If I have GMs who are running games, the game will thrive. If I have GMs who don't want to run games or have an incentive to not be a GM, the game will be dead in weeks. So I have to do everything in my power to remove hurdles that prevent people from wanting to GM. So I had to open up basically everything to everyone. But now you have GMs who are players, and the player might want to accomplish something with their PC. And now that GM is running an event to determine how much that clock fills in. Now, I trust my GMs. I think they're all good people. No one's getting paid to do this, so it's not like there's some scheming. But do I think that GM can be completely unbiased? Of course not. It's not even a question of bias. They might just not be interested in other elements of the game. So why would I run an event for a game or for a clock that's completing that I don't even care about? I don't care about it as a player. I don't care about it as my PC. I'm certainly not going to care about it as a GM. I care about this zone. I care about this thing happen. Yeah. So it's difficult. So in that respect, you might think that this is a complete and clusterfuck. But no, Northern Reaches is bigger now than ever. We play 25 games a week. Couple, for most of the season, we make it work, and the reason is because 99% of time, I should say 95% of the time, 95% of the people are extremely reasonable and fair and balanced, and they're good people, and our Discord is full of awesome people. But 5% of the time, you roll that nat one, shit goes out. GM favoritism trenches when I was deep into the Neverwinter. I love the Jess side, I don't even know what to call it, Jess, like this like whole side culture of role-playing games that you've been involved in, like the LARP and your Neverwinter Nights deep trenching. Spectrum summed it up very nicely. So in conclusion, having a PvP setting in a TTRPG sounds like a nice and interesting idea, but just leads to a shitty experience for everyone. Yes, pretty much. Right. So what we end up having to make is cozy clocks that don't compete. That is basically correct. It's like managing a campaign that can be played around the road is hard. That's correct. LARP is anywhere from 6 to 12 years ahead of the curve on tabletop on drama. All new tabletop drama is always old LARP drama. That's fantastic. That's correct, Sims. Great point. Even if a GM doesn't have a PC, they can have a bias and a preference for outcome. Maybe they shouldn't have that bias, but they probably do. Absolutely. Cozy clocks are just clocks that don't really that they only help people. They don't hurt anybody. Yeah, they just don't compete. Correct. Right. So. Elia was there in season 1. Not to mention, I recall there being clocks that a fair number of GMs and players outright hated the very existence of. Oh, no, Smendon. This would be an entirely new place. In fact, Smendon, Jojo, if you really one tick, it's like, well, I ran 5 games. They just each happen to be 1 hour. Part of what I wanted, partly Smendon, and what I might do is I might steal the world that we had originally built for our Fabula Ultima game, because I thought it was a really cool world, and I just don't see us using it anytime soon. And the cool part about it is I can kind of steal some elements from Dragontide without making it like a literal copy of Dragontide. But yeah. It's a totally separate world. So yeah, it's tough. So like one of the solutions that we have right now for Northern Reaches season 3 is in the event that we have 2 clocks. So instead of being competing, these clocks. So instead of having competing clocks, so we're getting rid of versus. Get out of there. We're going to have interacting clocks. And what this actually means is instead of a binary table, right, what we're going to have is we are going to have 4 different outcomes which are defined prior to the event taking place. Where what happens if both clocks fail? What happens if one clock succeeds and the other clock fails? What happens if one clock succeeds and the other one fails? And what happens if they both succeed? Because this 4th result may not just be, right, one and, it may be not just, the union of those 2 events. It might be something, now for something totally different, where if they both succeed, you get this new element. And again, everyone would be very much aware of what is happening. And so instead of getting, you win, I lose, you get a whole brand new ass thing, right? I mean, obviously, the easiest way to do it would be that you just get, everyone gets what they clocked for. But yeah, so the Asmodeus stuff was the birthplace of some truly legendary salt fields. Yes. Yes. I mean, I could tell you stories of the salt of. I mean, there was a lot of salt in season 1. There was a lot of salt in season 2. But what's funny about that is the people who weren't salty about it have been patrons for 4 years or 5 years. They talk about it like it was the greatest gaming experience, one of the greatest gaming experiences, maybe the greatest gaming experience I've ever had. Wow, it was so incredible and immersive, and it really felt like a living, breathing world in a way that an MMO could never do, because an MMO has to, be the same for everybody. Everybody can go raid that dragon. If I kill him and I come back, the NPC that I released from the prison is back in the jail cell. The dragon that I killed is back up. It has to be available. You can't ever really change Azeroth. They introduced instancing and phasing, but at the end of the day, you really can't change it. You certainly can't change it. Maybe you could change it from your point of view, but you can't change it for everyone. And so having that ability to alter the game world in that way was something that nobody had ever experienced, not in an MMO, and not in a tabletop game. Because in a tabletop game, you're just working with your own party. You might change the world, but the world is all NPCs. You're not changing the experience for those other people. And so, yeah, and I think the last time people really could have theoretically experienced that was back in the 1970s and the 80s, with the way that D&D campaigns were originally described in the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master Guide, which Ben Robbins wrote an essay about. And the name of that essay was called Western Marches, and that became known as a Western March. But that's really just the way that D&D campaigns used to be played, where you had one GM and 20 players, and you might not make it to the game that week or 2 weeks, and then you come back in 3 weeks and you're like, cool, all right, let's go. I'm ready to go back to the dungeon, and I really want to go explore the Hall of Fire. And like, oh, didn't somebody tell you? What? Oh, they blew up the Hall of Fire. Like, it's gone. Like, they detonated it. They threw the sphere of ice in there, and it created cataclysmic destruction. Actually, most of the dungeon is now a smoking ruin. And you're like, wait, what? I wanted to go in there. I wanted to loot that. I wanted to get that. I wanted to kill. Nope, that's all gone. And you're like, well, can I? Nope. It's just done. It's just different. It's just over. So, that is what we struggle with. Because a lot of times when we run into a problem in Northern Reaches, our knee-jerk solution is, okay, let's fix this the way we would fix it if it was an MMO. But that kind of robs you of that living world agency, and I don't think that's a good outcome either. All right. Well, what time we got here? 3 a.m. I mean, that's what I would hope would happen, Smendon. That's what I want to have happen. But sometimes it depends. There was they did run a living game, but it was Raven's Bluff. Is what it was called, and it was play by mail. Yes. But it was called Raven's Bluff. I can never remember where Raven's Bluff is. Raven's Bluff, is it? It's not in the Eastern Moon Sea. Is it in the Eastern Moon Sea? Or is it in Aglarond? Let's take a look. Do we got a map? Let's picture of it. I need a map. Okay, it's in the Dragon's Reach. Okay, so I said it was in the Aglarond, but It's actually. What? Wait, no, I didn't want to click on that. Why did you bring that up? Okay, well, God, Jesus. Open up the freaking picture, would you? I just want to see where it is. Is that the new Sea of Fallen Stars? No, it's terrible. All right, anyways, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Well, I said it was in the East. That's why I called it the unapproachable East. I consider the vast part of the unapproachable East. Is the vast part of the unapproachable East. No, it's not technically the unapproachable East. It's like on the border of the unapproachable East. Oh, wait, maybe. No. Man, anything that's on like a fandom site should just be fucking outlawed. Because like the number of ads and crappy pop-ups that happen in that stuff, like why even put your wiki on there? Just throw it away. Anyways, instead they did what? Screw them. That's bullshit. I'm gonna go yell at the overlords. Yeah, I mean pretty much. For Dagger Reaches, would you allow void material in it, or would it just be CRB stuff? I mean, that's a great question, Smenden. I mean, it comes down to how much I actually care about anything, because there's three thoughts. Thought number one is the void isn't part of the SRD, which means it's not part of the Foundry, assuming we use Foundry, and I would assume that we would use Foundry. So that, let alone, puts a big no void stuff. Number two, the void stuff changes like frequently, like update all the time. So that's really annoying. So probably not. And then number three, you are presuming that we are going to be using the CRB stuff. I mean, if it's Dagger Reaches, why not, go Derek hard on it and start making that bitch 12 levels. That's all I'm saying. Now you might be saying, Derek, but how would they make 12 levels? The game, you just said you wanted to use Foundry. Yes, but you are forgetting the part where I would spend too much money that I don't have, that I do have, but I should be saving. And then I'd hire a Foundry developer or three, and I would just make my own custom system module. So that way I could have my 12 levels and eat it too. Correct. It takes a lot of maturity and personal work to be okay with something cool happening in your game, but you didn't get to be there for it, and it's hard on GMs to teach maturity to their duties. Case in point, at the end of season 1, we had a big raid, and it was against Triune, the tripartite god, and we had to make a cap. And so we said, look, we had players who were level 20, and we said we're going to allow all level 20 players, and we're going to allow 13 people to go on the raid. I think it was 13. And if you're level 20, you're in. And then after that, it's decreasing order of level. So if you're 19, and there's still spaces available, you're in. But if you're level 20, you get in regardless. Like, we'll expand the number. If there's 20 level 20s for some reason, you're in. But after, but we're going to cap it at 13 otherwise. And after that, like, if you're 19, you get into it. And so we ended up having 7 level 20s, a handful of level 19s, I think a level 18. And then there was like a level 17 person or something who didn't get in. And they were mad about it. And they said, well, that's not fair. Like, the last couple of weeks of the campaign, like, other people were grinding, playing 3 or 4 games a week, trying to get to level 20 so that they could make it to the raid. And, I got busy at work, and I've got a little daughter, and I'm upset about that. That is a totally valid response to have. But, what can I do? So, anyways, Void content is not going to be in the Foundry, so probably not. Also, Derek, I'll hire devs to build 2 more levels for the base game. Correct. Well, but the Void content changes all the time. That's the real problem with the Void content. Like if the Void content was locked in and it wasn't in the SRD, I mean, the part of the other problem though is like I think legally you're not allowed to use the Void content because it's not restricted to their Void. I don't know. I don't. They have a weird license. Well, when I say all the work, I mean the player and the GM. This is if I want to use the mega game as an excuse to playtest my version of Daggerheart. But, considering the game is brand new, I probably won't do. But I'll tell you, I mean, I love the idea of that 12 level. 12 level game. It's called a playtest. There you go. It's fantastic. Yeah, maybe for Dagger Reaches Season 2. Yeah, there you go. That's a good place for it. Right. Well, that skill just, people need to learn. You feel upset. It's reasonable to feel upset. It's an upsetting set of circumstances, but it's not a fault of the game. It's just a thing that happened. And I think, I think that is a very reasonable. Unfortunately, that is common sense is hardly common. Right, exactly. You get access to 4 level 10 cards. And you can only pick 2 of them. Or one of them, I mean. Maybe 2 if you use that upgrade slot. But man, That's why I even tell people. I said, I don't even have to make level 11 and 12 abilities. You don't have to. Just because sometimes it's cool just to be able to cool, I can take 3 of the 4 level 10 abilities. That is pretty cool. That's kind of sweet. This kind of maturity about bad things having in common. All that's why people got to learn. Go to therapy or something. I went to therapy. Therapy was good, sort of. My therapist was like, "You are surprisingly self-aware," and I was like, "Yes." And she's like, "But you still have problems," and I go, "Yes." And she goes, "That is weird," and I said, "I know." There is actually Yes and Dragons. The Void is not in the SRD. That is the legal distinction. And the extension to the VTT is that it has to be in the SRD. So that is actually completely a legal distinction. So even though the Void stuff has been published, it is not part of the SRD. If you download the SRD, it's not in the SRD. If it's not in the SRD, it technically does not have the it is not on the whitelist to be allowed as part of the digital Foundry offering. That is the I'm not gonna. I don't want to go into a whole thing about it, but it's the purpose of Daggerheart isn't to make scary combat challenges, right? Daggerheart is not a game about can the party win. I mean, I don't even think technically any of these games are like that anymore because the math of the game is so favored to the players that the answer 99% of the time is yes. And then for some odd reason, when that somehow isn't the case, the GM will fudge and then the players win anyways. So I think fundamentally, if people are playing Daggerheart because they want to have intense, challenging, scary combat encounters, go play Draw Steel. Go play Draw Skill. I mean, I'm not even saying that as a hater. I'm saying that all of the combat stuff in Daggerheart is performative. It's there so that you can push buttons and look cool. Is there a game there? Yeah, kinda, sorta. But in a fiction-first game where the mechanics are, debatable at best, where the GM can use fear to kind of do whatever they want, when the GM can take a turn whenever they want, what are we doing here? So, I mean, if you don't want to steamroll everything, just don't make a powerful character. Solution. Boom. It's like when people would play PBTA games And everyone knew that in PBTA games, if you did X, Y, and Z, the game would be completely broken. This is nothing new. They didn't even have monster stats. But like if you got a +4 or whatever like that. And so then people would get to a +4 and they'd be like complain. Could be like, oh, well, the game is easy. I'm like, well, why don't you not break your character then? Why don't you just not take a +4? I mean, how can I not take a +4? It's right there. I have to take it. No, you don't have to take it. Yeah, you don't have to take it. I mean, if for example, I mean, like if my players were like, "Oh, that was too easy," we steamroll. I was like, "Cool, I'm adding 10. I'm adding 10 to all the difficulty levels of every monster in the game." There you go. You happy now? Is the game challenging? Are you having fun now? Look, you'll miss all the time. It'll be sweet. You'll love it. I mean, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just pick a thing. And then you know what happened? I'll wipe the party. They'll all TPK. And then they'll complain. So there's no winning. Anyway. Plus, with the use of fear, that's so true. Shots fired on Splendor, but yeah, I think the Seraph is like the weakest class, maybe. And although Paradise are awesome, and I think they are really cool, but I do think Splendor is a weak domain. And I think Seraph, and not like weak. It's not very. I don't know. It doesn't have that kind of evocativeness that I would like it to have. But anyways. Right, Jojo, that's correct. I mean, I always say that about Blades in the Dark. I go, after 10 or 12 sessions of Blades in the Dark, your character probably starts to get action rating rolls that are like 4 dice, maybe even 5 dice. And like if you have 4 or 5 dice in Blades in the Dark, like you're gonna roll a lot of 6s. And if you're rolling a lot of 6s, you're succeeding with no complication. So the game rapidly becomes very boring. Ironically, the exact thing that Blades in the Dark tells you, this is the game, you're over, you should end the campaign because it's boring, is exactly the thing that every D20 player like dreams of. Oh my God, can you imagine me having such a high bonus that I'll never fail ever again? And it's like this dream scenario. And then that happens, and then they complain. They say, oh, the game is boring. We're just steamrolling everything. I don't know. It's crazy. See, at least there's honesty here, and that's why I respect the shit out of Aelia. No way I'd ever pass an opportunity to make my character better at what they do best. So. I mean, yeah, hey, listen. Okay, but when your character is if your character is really good at what they do and they're the best at what they do, and then they like win all the time, are you going to complain? Like if you built your character to be the greatest swords master of all time, she's never been beaten in a duel. Are you going to complain when you just kind of kill everything and everyone with your sword? Unfortunately, Mateo, that is the realm where game designers go to die and where GMs start to fudge. Right? And that you're right, because you're right, but that is the problem. I think game designers tend to over design their games trying to reach that point. Whether they succeed or not is questionable, but it's also where GMs start to fudge because they're like, well, this needs to be narratively awesome, but it also needs to be a great game, and I think that's really tough. Yeah, I mean it's insane. And by the way, Beowulf, that's assuming that you're only happy with a 6, right? Like you also succeed on a 4 or 5. Yes, there's still a complication, but yeah, I mean it's pretty crazy. Like you're almost definitely not going to fail, So, and that's the other problem, because like you said, no, that'd be dumb. I'd celebrate that and say mission accomplished. And that's another problem, like for a lot of people, mission accomplished means level 20 or whatever the max level of this game is. And And I think a lot of people are like not okay with just saying like, hey, you know what? My character is cool and very powerful, and they did what they didn't need to do, and I'm done. I'm out. You know, I'm out. That's cool. I think that's cool. Sims 3 says, personally, I've been having this problem of players making their characters overpowered, then complaining that combat is boring in Pathfinder 1st Edition. Like, what do you want from me? You built exactly for this. Of course it's easy. So this reminds me of a story. One of my buddies, and my friends and I were getting together, and we were playing some board game called Terraforming Mars. You may have heard of it. Anyways, the first time we played, my buddy Ross won. Like the second time we played, I won, and I didn't even know I won. We didn't know how. Or no, the first time we played, I won, but we didn't know how Ocean scored. So I thought I lost really badly, and then they're like, "Oh no, you get a point for every for every forest hex that you put down on Mars." And I'm like, "Oh shit, okay, well then I got like 20 extra points," and so I won. And then like the second time we played, my buddy Ross won. And so then, like, we didn't play for a while. And then, like, the next time we played, this buddy of mine was like, yeah, I played, like, 300 times on, like, my tablet. Like, I downloaded, bought the game, or whatever, played, like, 300 times. And we're like, oh, okay. So then we start playing, and, you know, he absolutely crushes us. And he was like, yeah, that wasn't even remotely challenging. You know, like, you guys need to get better. And we're like, well, no, why if you wanted that, why'd you go play it 300 times? Like you should just played it like at the same rate as the rest of us, and then the game would have been challenging because you were losing before. You can't go and play 300 times and get really good at the game and then complain now that you're winning and that we're not good. Like that doesn't work. Like you don't get to do that. So, you know, it's kind of like, yeah, like people bust their, you know, make their characters busted, and then, which is, by the way, what PF2 does. PF2 says, yeah, definitely max out your character. Yeah, take the best bonus, get the plus wound. And then they're like, we're actually going to raise the AC of all the monsters by 3. And you're like, oh man, these monsters are so tough. I got to get stronger. And PF2's like, yeah, get stronger. Look at you, you're so strong. And then we made the monsters strong, just as strong. And so nothing ever changes. You play through the whole game. And apparently it works because like a lot of people are not aware of this, and they're like, yeah, it's great. But if you ever learn, you're like, well, then why am I getting stronger with the monster? So, well, there is actually an answer to this, which people hate so much. And that is that the original, I've talked about this before. So I'm going to go on probably maybe my last rant before I have to leave to the airport. Is PBTA, even Vincent Baker knew that the game did not have that sort of long-term viability. But put into Apocalypse World and put into Monster of the Week and put into all these games is very cool. And like modern PBTA games don't really talk about it too much. And I've done like polls and stuff, and I've talked to people, and like a lot of people say, no, we never do that. Or I've done polls and people said, oh, I would hate that. And that is the idea of playbook change. And that was part of the original core idea of PBTA, was playbook change, where your character persists, but the mechanics of your character are essentially reset because you changed your playbook. And this just made, like, you know, people's simulationist minds, you know, implode under the weight of 1,000 dying stars. But the idea was that, you know, you reach this point in the narrative, in the story, where your character was sort of maxed out mechanically, but fictionally, narratively, there was still a lot more to your story happen. And then something big happens to you, you change your playbook. And when you change your playbook, it's not like, oh, you're multi-classing. No, it means you change your playbook. It means that your stats, you almost like a new mechanical character, but your story and the fiction of your character continues on. And that was always part of the DNA of PBTA. But it was, and it technically, theoretically, should allow you to play the game for a very long time. but people hated it. I don't, mostly because of simulationism. But meanwhile, you see this all the time in books and movies, all the time. Anybody who watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, right? Willow's first playbook was precocious hacker nerd, and then she got the witch playbook, right? She changed her playbook. She got a whole new set. It's almost like it was a whole new character. It was still Willow. The fictional timeline was still Willow, but the abilities and what Willow did were very, very different because now she was witch. She had a different playbook. Before she was immortal, now she's a witch, right? And so you see this all the time in right. It's like the HX thing, right? We're talking PBTA stuff here, right? But how hex resets when you cap hex. Because the idea is that your relationship has fundamentally changed. And now that your hex is 0 because you don't have experience with this new level of your relationship. And again, people are like, no, how that doesn't make any sense. I think it makes sense. Not only do I think it makes perfect sense, I think it's so elegant and I think it's so beautiful. This idea of that a relationship between two people can change, and what was once this very high rated relationship is almost now an unknown factor. It's the same person, but it's the same, thing. Shocking. What? Beowulf hates playbook change. What? Elia doesn't like playbook change. That's not shocked. I'm shocked. This is my shocked face. Anyways. Jess says, yeah, I want to do this back on Neverwinter Nights. I was playing on a Shadow Weave sorcerer, and at some point when I was epic level 32 or some shit, I wanted Char to cut me off from the weave. I'm from the Shadow Weave, I imagine. Yeah, from the Shadow Weave, and all my sorcerer levels become useless. And now I've gone from being an infinitely powerful sorcerer to learning wizardry from level 0. Yeah, that's sick. Yeah, that's sweet. So. You're gonna start using that in place of FU bonds. I think it's cool. I think it's neat. I love it. And again, there's, the problem is that kind of thing bothers two types of people. One, it bothers the simulationisms, and two, it bothers the gamists who want to see the numbers go up and want to see the numbers go burr. They don't like the idea that I leveled up, so my bonus dropped from 4 to 0. They don't like that. So the only people that are really truly happy with this are the narrativists. But I definitely fall into that category of narrativism for sure. But yeah, so I love that idea. But I mean, I think that's an awesome idea too, Jess. You're just yep, I don't have those powers anymore, So, but she didn't, though. Not really. If you watch the way that the show approached it, she definitely has a new role. The character itself changed, and she didn't solve issues like that anymore. So, yeah. Well, playbooks aren't classes. It's a classic mistake is to assume that a playbook is a class, and it's not. A playbook is not a class. Now, to be fair, sure, you could carry over something from your continuity, but I mean, again, but you say it yourself. This is your cure your feelings of continuity, right? And that assumed that to you means that the mechanics are more important than the narrative, which is fine. But realize that in PBTA, right? It's not about whether you can or can't do something. Of course you can do something. There's no mechanical real reason that you can't do it, Sure. This is true. It does work better in games without a level, for sure. PBTA does not, for sure. Yeah, exactly. Her role totally changed in later seasons. Correct. So, hey, I mean, Zen, maybe there's more of a narrativism to what you than what you like, than when you're care to admit. Right. Oh yeah, no. Listen, stories, TV shows, movies. You know, they do it all the time. Okay, so the short answer is, and it may sound like a cop-out, but it's not. Classes are about what you can do. Playbooks are about how you do something. So classes sort of define what your powers and abilities are. Playbooks define the style or the way that you approach problem solving, rather than giving you a concrete list over what you can or can't do. Another way to think of it is, where do you have power in the fictional mechanical interface of this game? So to take an example, let me see if I can find like root really quick. Because that's just like one that I always think of. Downloads root. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to bring up a PDF here. Okay, so this is root. And this is... So this is one of the playbooks, right? The Arbiter. You know, they're the big guy, you know. And the Arbiter has this move here called Crash and Smash. When you smash your way through scenery to reach someone or something, roll with might. On a hit, you reach your target. On a 10 plus, choose 1. On a 7 through 9, choose 2. The thing to remember is that this does not mean that only the Arbiter can crash and smash. Okay, it doesn't mean that the Arbiter if the Arbiter doesn't take this ability that they can crash and smash, that, you know, they can't crash. This doesn't mean, so you're like, so only the Arbiter can smash their way through a scenery to reach someone or something? No, anyone can smash their way through scenery to reach someone or something. But when an Arbiter does it, we get this unique procedural element. And one of the things that this procedural element does is that it makes it so that when the Arbiter does it, it has a different impact on the narrative. It has a different impact on the fiction. It has a different impact on the mechanics than if someone else does it. Literally, the rules of crashing and smashing work differently for someone who has this power rather than someone who doesn't. So differentiate that with like Pathfinder 2. Climb works the same whether you have it or you don't have it, whether you're legendary in it, whether you're trained in it, whether you have a high strength or you have a low strength. The climb rules are the same for every character. What the rules tell us is whether or not your character is good at doing that or not, right? In this case, in PBTA, what a playbook does is it literally sort of changes the world's physics engine for you so that you get different outcomes of doing the same thing because it's more narratively in line, right, with what your character does and what role they fill in the story. So hopefully that's somewhat of an explanation. Good night, Creepy. Thanks. I'm going to be heading off here in -3 minutes because if I leave now, I should get to the airport at like 4:30 by the time I park my car and then through security at 5, and then they'll start boarding at 5. So I should be able to get to the gate. Exactly, Jess. What people miss about PBT Ice Dog games versus D20 is that in D20, you're power game by picking big number options and doing your big numbers. In PBTA, you power game by ensuring you have the most control of the story. And that's exactly right. It's all about the idea of, like, you know, who has the conch for the Lord of the Flies enjoyers amongst us. Like, who has narrative authority here? You know, who has the ability to sort of write the fiction in a way that they like? You know, who has the ability to shape the narrative the most powerfully? So correct, hide to size. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because this role triggers. The GM doesn't get to decide, right? What's the rule? 5e or Power 5e Power Pathfinder 2, whatever, has a ton of rules, and the GM gets to decide whether or not they use them and whether they apply and when they apply. In PBTA, there's very few rules, but the GM does not get to decide whether they apply or not. So if you don't have this move when somebody describes what they're doing and they're describing as smashing their way through the scenery to reach someone, then this move doesn't trigger. Instead, the GM decides what happens, and they might not make a move. They might call for trusting fate or trusting luck or something else. They get to decide how the narrative flows. By choosing this power, you're sort of taking control away from the GM and giving it to yourself, so that you have the power to control your character's story. See, look, Beowulf, you're struggling, bustling, buddy. So on a hit, you reach your target. So what does a person without Crash and Smath roll to reach their target? Maybe they don't roll at all. Maybe the GM just decides. Maybe the GM says, mark of fatigue, and you get there. Maybe the GM says, trust fate. Maybe the GM says, I'm trying to think. I don't remember all the basic moves. Maybe the GM says, because you're not attempting a roguish feat, so you're not figuring someone out. You're not persuading an NPC. You're not reading a tense situation. You're not tricking an NPC. Yeah, so the GM might ask you, you might need a roll with luck. But ultimately, if a rule doesn't trigger, if a move doesn't trigger, then that means the GM makes a move. And if the GM makes a move, they can make whatever move they want. So, by rules of Powered by the Apocalypse, if in the game that we're playing, you are making a move and you're doing something in the fiction and it doesn't trigger a move, then the response is that the GM makes a move. And the GM move can be whatever the GM move whatever GM move the GM move thinks appropriate. Maybe they make a soft move. Maybe they make a hard move. Doesn't feel like a hard move should be appropriate, but maybe you've given them a golden opportunity, Beowulf. So maybe the GM interprets that as a golden opportunity. They use that to make a hard move, and they really punish you, and they crush on you. Or maybe they don't. The point is, when you, as the arbiter, choose this move, the GM no longer gets to decide what happens when you smash your way through the scenery to reach someone or something. Now, we have to make this roll. And you get to roll with might, which presumably on your character is probably your highest stat, which it is. So your character is good at this, as they would say. But this means narratively, you as a player now have more control over what happens in the scene than you did before. Because before, without this move, when your character smashes your way through scenery to reach someone or something, no move triggers. Or a GM move triggers. And the GM gets to decide. When you take this move, now you have that narrative authority. So again, playbooks aren't about what you can do. They're about how you do it. Correct. Yes, you would lose the ability if you change playbooks. That's correct. Because your character isn't an arbiter anymore in the fiction. You're not changing. You're thinking of this stuff too. Yeah, you're changing your trope, TJ Duck. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, you're not. It's not some skill that you learned. What even fucking does this even mean? This isn't even a skill. Because look what it does. It says something like, you damage or leave behind a piece of gear. It's not even like a skill thing. It's it's literally a narrative move. You can't even think of this as like a skill that you learned. It's not even a skill that you learned. So yeah, moves are less like enablers and more like overrides. That's a great way of thinking about it. And yes, the key thing here understanding is you're changing your trope. You're changing your role in the story. It's not about some physics engine approximation of what your character is. I'll be fine. It's so early. It's about your role in the narrative. Yeah. And that's why we call it a playbook, right? It's why we don't call it a class. It's why we call it a playbook. And for it's it's a collection of strategies. It's a collection of ideas about how you express your character in the story. And it looks like everyone's yelling at me to go to the airport. All right. I'll let Jess have the last word. And just to complete the circle, power gaming and LARP is social engineering your way into favoritism from the organizations. If they like playing with you, they will naturally play with you more. Now, I argue that is the exact problem with what I call Mother May I GMing, right? When people talk about rulings over rules, avoiding dice rolls, right? And I often say, all you've done is change the game. The game is still there. But the new game is now convincing the GM that they like your idea. So it's still a game, but it's a different game. Now it's social engineering your GM into believing your idea, or to trusting your idea, or to agreeing with your idea. Because, your GM's not an expert. They're not unbiased. So if you can appeal to what they like and what they want to see, they're more likely to agree with you and say, oh, that totally would work. Oh, yeah, you should definitely do that. Oh, yeah, that's exactly how that would go. And the reason I know this is because I've seen it done to me. And I know that there are players that, are better at convincing me than other players. And one of the things that's nice about PBTA is it kind of removes that from me to a certain extent. Boyko, hot take, but I don't know that they're wrong. This is my problem with OSR principles. Player skill is a myth. And Boyko, I agree with you. Well, let me say it another way. The player skill is being good at convincing your GM. That's the real skill. That's the meta skill, So. Alrighty, I got to go to PAX. Yeah. So cool times had by all. Yeah. So I'm sure I'll hop on I'll have my phone with me. I'm sure I'll hop on and talk to you guys, but I'll be a little bit out of pocket for the next for the Labor Day weekend. So if I don't get a real chance to talk with you, everybody, hopefully if you have a great Labor Day here, if you're in the United States, otherwise have a great weekend. I'm sure you'll hear from me. I'll make some posts and videos. I've never been to PAX West, so this will be pretty cool. I'm looking forward to meeting up with my good friend Kaz, who lives just north of Seattle there, and maybe some patrons as well. So there's some people who are in the Pacific Northwest and or going to PAX. So hopefully we can have some fun times and meet up there. So if for whatever reason you're in the area and we'll try to figure out, we'll meet up. So, all right, thanks everybody. Appreciate you hanging out with me super late here, and as I get ready to head over to the airport and make my way over to the other side of the country. Until next time, we'll see you. Sorry, I got distracted. Anyways, we'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Peace out, everybody. Good night.